Hello and welcome to Mad Knitting. This is episode 74. My name is Susan. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am coming to you from Madison, Wisconsin, where I live and work. It's early 2025. It is Thursday, January 2nd, and I finally have a little bit of time and no other people around so I could sit down and make a video. It's been almost a month. You can find me elsewhere online as madtownmama on Ravelry and madtown_mama on Instagram. I am most active in those places. On Instagram, I share a lot about crafting, but I share a lot of other things too. It's just sort of, whatever I feel like taking pictures of and talking about. What should I say? It's been almost a month, like I said. December just kind of was a blur. It got away from me. I really wanted to sit down and record something to wrap up the year, something to get out there before 2024 was over, but it just didn't happen. Between all the different things going on, last minute stuff for work, I had a lot of music stuff going on, plus the holidays, people around, it just didn't happen. So I will say that I know that a lot of content creators out there like to do a sort of end of year wrap up. They'll talk about all the things that they made over the course of the year, maybe some highlights, maybe give some stats about how much money they spent or how much yarn they used or something like that. I'm not going to do that. That's just not for me. I love it when other people do. And if that's something that you enjoy, I think that's great. But I personally have found that unnecessary record keeping and tracking is just something that I don't need in my life. Excuse me. I've had a couple of times in the last few years where I thought, I should make a spreadsheet of my whole stash and like track how much is coming in and how much I'm using. And that just, I'll get started and 30 minutes in, it's so overwhelming and I don't see the point. Like nobody else cares about this. So why would I take the time and the mental space to do it? I think that kind of goes maybe into some things about how I grew up and how I was raised that we don't need to get into now. But anyway, all that to say, this is just like a regular episode. I'm going to have some stuff to share that I finished. I'm going to tell you about some stuff that I'm working on. I have a few thoughts about the new year, and I do have some reading to share with you. So let's get into it. Let's start with what I'm wearing. This is the Reflections Pullover. It is by the designer Meiju Kallio, I think. She's Finnish. It's from a book that she wrote that I own called Contrasts, Textured Knits, something like that. It's got a lot of really wonderful patterns in it. I made this a little over a year ago. I think it was kind of in the latter half of 2023 out of some Cascade 220 that I had in my stash, and I love it. It is one of my favorite sweaters. It's a deep fuchsia pink, which is not normally part of my sort of normal color palette, but I like it and I think it's a good color for me. And it's like a modified drop shoulder design. There's some shoulder shaping, but as you can see, the shoulder goes beyond my shoulder. The shoulder of the sweater goes beyond my shoulder on my body, and I love it. The cables are very easy and intuitive, and this is a great sweater to wear on a cold day like we're having now. Okay, the finished objects I have to show you are all holiday knits. The first thing I will talk about is a pair of mittens that I made for my daughter that I don't have with me. I can't find them. I think maybe she's wearing them. She's out doing things today. So I'll just briefly tell you about them. The pattern is called Boneyard Sweethearts Mittens. It's by Stephanie Lotven, also known as Tellybean Knits. And the reason I'm not looking at you is because I was getting the yarn that I used. So Boneyard Sweethearts is like a whole series of patterns that this designer has put out. There's a fingering weight hat, a DK weight hat, a sweater with a yoke design, and then these mittens came out last year. And I made the hat for myself and my daughter and for somebody else, which I talked about in a recent episode. And my daughter absolutely loves that hat and thought the mittens looked really cool, so I made them for her for Christmas. So I'll have a picture somewhere in here so that you can see them. But one of the fun things about these mittens is that I used some wool that I bought when we took our trip to New Zealand last spring. So one of the first shops I went to, I found this brand called Red Hut, Woolly Red Hut. This is DK weight. I think it's merino. No, it doesn't say merino, but it does say 8-ply, 100% pure New Zealand wool. I don't think it was processed in New Zealand, but it is New Zealand wool. This was not terribly expensive, and they had a bunch of different colors in these 50-gram skeins. So I made the mittens out of charcoal, and this is called white cream. So very straightforward. The mitten pattern calls for like 3 colors, like a different color on the cuff than you use for the main part. I used the dark charcoal for the cuff and everything else, and I needed like 2 yards of a second skein. I mean, I was halfway through the second thumb when I ran out and had to break into the second skein. So, you know, had I made the cuff like 2 rounds shorter or something, I would have been able to squeeze the entire project out of 1 skein of the main color. But good thing I had backup. I've had requests before to say more about the yarn I use. So what can I say about this yarn? I really liked working with it. It's not superwash, so it was good for color work, very comfortable to knit with. You can see it's, you know, it's developed like any commercial yarn, so it's very even, kind of a tight ply. So I'm hoping that the mittens wear well. There was no sign that it was like pilling or getting fuzzy or anything while I was working with it. Yeah, it's good. I have a few more colors in this, and I'm looking forward to working with it more. The pattern, I will say, I would not recommend Boneyard Sweethearts, any of them, for a beginner colorwork pattern, because some of those floats are very long. Just the design, you know, it's a skeleton, and then you have a choice between what's between the skeletons. There's either little ghosts or little hearts, but sometimes you have many stitches in one color before you change colors. For the mittens, I used quite a bit of ladder back jacquard, which is a technique for catching long floats in the back of your knitting that don't show in the front. And I like it better than just kind of twisting them in the back or sort of trying to catch the yarn in the stitch. I did that a lot with the mittens because, you know, when you're putting them on and off your hand, I really didn't want her fingers to get caught in those floats when she was putting the mittens on. So I was using that technique even if I had just a 5-stitch float. Normally 5 stitches, I wouldn't bother to catch the yarn in the back, but since it was mittens and there's like lots of appendages in there, that was just playing it safe. So that slowed down the process just a bit. That was kind of a last minute impulse cast on. Like, I didn't mention it at all in my previous video because I don't even think it was on my radar, but she saw the design, she liked it. I decided I wanted to make her mittens for Christmas, and I think I got them done in the space of about 4 or 5 days. So that's my finished object number 1, and I'm sorry I don't have it to show you here, other than the picture. The second finished object is a pair of mittens for my son, which I have talked about. Here they are. He is out with friends, but not wearing them today. It's cold, but not like, I mean, it's like below freezing cold, but I think it's like in the 20s Fahrenheit, which is probably just in the single digits negative Celsius. I'm not really sure. So I had started these last time. The pattern I have, and I will show you. This is from 2011. It's a pattern by Chau. I don't know if I bought it right when it came out, but I know I've had it a long time. So it's a great pattern. I highly recommend it. I'm sure you can tell just from looking at this that the color work, you don't have long floats at all. It's very intuitive. the repeats are small. It's a 4-stitch repeat across, and then even the rounds, like the vertical repeat, the row repeat, is only 6 rounds tall. So if you need to make an adjustment for, you know, if you want to make your cuff longer or shorter, or the top longer or shorter, that's pretty easy to do because of how short the repeat is. Another really good thing about this pattern is that she has 4 different sizes for 1 gauge. So you've got a good range to choose from. I made the 3rd size, which is pretty big because my son's hands are bigger than mine. He's about 6 feet tall and he has kind of big-ish hands. But if your gauge is not quite what hers is, because there's enough sizes, I think you could probably find one that's close enough that will get you something, that will get you a mitten that will fit. So those are all good things. And the instructions are very clear, and all that. Let's see. So they are lined, as you can see, and it felt like these took me forever to finish. They are big mittens. It is a pretty tight gauge. It's 7 stitches per inch, using DK weight yarn for the outside, and I used a fingering weight for the inside. She says you can use a lace weight or like a fuzzy yarn, but I wanted these to be extra warm because my son goes to school in Minnesota, where it can get very, very cold. And you know, the liner is plain, like this should have been lickety split, but for some reason it felt like it took forever. I don't think I will ever do mittens like this again, where you actually have the lining attached. The tricky thing was getting the size just right, because you want the lining to be a little bit smaller than the outside layer, so that it will fit inside. Okay, and I think if I'd used lace weight, you know, there would have been more flexibility there just because the fabric's thin. But if your lining is like the same size or even a little bit longer or wider, it's gonna get bunched up inside. And this was really clear when I had them finished, like just in time. We opened presents Christmas Eve. He saw the mittens, he liked them, he tried them on, and then he was like, oh, it's pretty bunchy in the thumb. Like I had made the thumb of the lining. I thought that I had measured very carefully and held it against the outside part and made sure that it was a little bit shorter, but knitting is stretchy. Sometimes it's just really hard to tell. And sure enough, it wasn't very comfortable. And, you know, as annoying as that was, I realized I'd rather fix it for him so that it'll be comfortable and he'll enjoy wearing them than say, tough luck, I'm tired of knitting these. You're gonna have to live with it. So anyway, so I had to take, you know, I had to like pick out where I had hidden the ends. That's another thing. When you have lined mittens, when you're doing the lining, you don't have any inside. Like when you close up the thumb or close up the top, you don't have the inside of the mitten to work with. You can't turn it inside out. So you're kind of working blind. So if I ever wanted liners again, I think I would just knit a whole separate pair that aren't attached. Okay, I've said a lot about that. Anyway, the end result is a pair of very warm mittens, and I think there's enough room that if he has a very thin pair of gloves he could wear inside for more like wind protection for those super cold days, he could do that. And that was the whole idea. Both mittens are made the same, so left and right, doesn't matter. For some reason, the cuff is a little different on both. You can probably see that there's sort of a ridge on this one, but not on this, and I'm not sure how that happened. Chau, the designer, has an ingenious method for creating the cast-on, or for, it's not exactly a provisional cast-on, but she has this really cool way of, like you double your stitches on one round and put half of them on waste yarn to save for the lining before you continue with the rest of the mitten. It's really cool. And I thought I did them both exactly the same, but something about the way that I put the live stitches on waste yarn or picked them up later or did the increases. I don't know. It must have been different from one mitten to the next. It's not, I mean, it's obvious when you look at it. It doesn't affect the fit or size or anything, so I've decided not to worry about it. But there you go. The yarn I used for these is, I shared this before. It's called Yarn Citizen. It's a brand that's new to me, but they just started carrying it at my local yarn shop, the Sowsier in Verona. Love that place, highly recommend. If you live in the Madison area or South Central Wisconsin and you want to check out a local yarn shop that also has a cafe, please check them out. I'm trying to see if I have a label. Yeah. So this is Harmony DK. It's half wool, half alpaca, DK weight blend. They have this in some kind of cashmere blend that I have not tried, but I really liked it. And they had colors that he liked because I didn't have anything in my stash in the right weight in the colors that he wanted. So I allowed myself to buy some yarn. The blue is called Deep Sea, and this sort of taupey, beigey, gray neutral is called Limestone. The deal with this company is that I think they go to mills in different parts of South America and collect a lot of the stuff that would get wasted, that is still fine enough quality to be used in garment knitting. So there's like an eco-friendly component to it, other than the fact that it is also not superwash. You have to hand wash this yarn. So that was really nice. Knitting with it was really nice. I mean, it's not superwash. It's soft, but not fuzzy. Like, I don't know if you can tell just from looking, but it's almost like it's fairly tightly plied. So I'm not worried about it pilling much. And it stood out very nicely for color work. I think if you did anything with cables or texture, it would show up pretty well too, because this is a very smooth yarn. So it seems like a very good all-purpose DK weight yarn. I didn't gauge swatch, I just cast on the mittens, so I couldn't tell you. It feels a little thin for DK, but I couldn't tell you like what gauge you're actually gonna get or what gauge I would get if I was knitting something else. For the liner, if you've been following me for a while, you might roll your eyes a little bit. Because for the liner, I use some stuff that's been in my stash for years. It's called Fresco by Classic Elite. This company ceased to exist years ago. I bought this at a local yarn shop. I don't even remember where I got it. Probably someplace that's no longer in business also. It's fingering weight, although fingering / sport, kind of on the heavier side. I'm looking for the fiber content. Wool, alpaca, Angora. 60% wool, 30% baby alpaca, 10% Angora. This is like soft as butter, soft as a baby's butt, which also means that it is a very bad choice for anything with high friction. And if you've been watching for a while, you may remember that a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago, I don't know. My son was learning to drive. For some reason, I remember that. And I made him a pair of mittens out of 2 different colors of this yarn, and he loved them, but they, you know, within a few months, like that, after the end of that first winter, they just looked like garbage. They were pilling, there were big chunks of fuzz coming off of them. You know, just wasn't a great choice for mittens that get a lot of wear. So why did I use it again? Well, for one thing, because it's going on the inside. So even if it does get fuzzy, it's not going to show as much as on the outside. For another thing, I suspect that most of the wear and the friction that you do to mittens is on the outside, because it's the outside that's gripping snow shovels, it's gripping the steering wheel of a car, that's, you know, picking things up like your book bag or grocery bags or whatever the case may be. So I'm thinking the friction on the inside will be minimized. I hope anyway. it's also warm and soft, and so especially with that alpaca and angora content, so I'm thinking these will be extra warm and protective against the winter. That said, we're having a very mild winter season so far. We did get some snow a couple weeks ago, but it's all melted. I don't know what the case is in Minnesota right now, but you know, it's sort of a crapshoot. You don't really know what winter's going to do these days, but he's prepared in any case. Okay. My second two finished objects are also holiday projects. They did not quite get done in 2024. I did the final finishing up work yesterday on New Year's Day. But I have talked about these before. So I made sweaters for my nieces. I have two little nieces, my brother's daughters, that live in Virginia, so I do not get to see them very often, sadly. But they know that I love to make things for them, and they love to wear things that Auntie Susu makes for them. They call me Auntie Susu. They have another aunt whose name is Susan. My sister-in-law has a sister named Susan, so they have to tell us apart somehow in how they refer to us. Anyway, they are 6 and 8 years old, so, you know, have some definite opinions about what they wear, but they still like wearing hand-knit things by me. So I had talked about this on at least 2 previous episodes where I was going to do the classic. I did the classic cardigan by Tin Can Knits. It's from their basics collection. Great collection, great set of patterns. They just basically, they do all the math for you, which I appreciate. Even as an experienced knitter, I like it when somebody else has figured that out for me. I sent my brother a link to the yarn to ask him to pick out colors, and this is the result. So here's one of them. Here's the other one. They are 6 and 8 years old, like I said. Let me talk about the bigger one first. So this is for the 8-year-old. Her favorite color these days is like teal or turquoise. So I chose, or had him choose, I lost my skein. This is Knitpicks Swish in the color Marina, the DK weight. They had a lot of their yarn on sale in the month of November for the big sale, so that's when I ordered it. I got more than I needed, so I have a couple skeins left over. But I also asked for measurements. I emailed my sister, no, I texted my sister-in-law and my brother and just said, when you've got a minute, if you could measure their jackets and just give me like sleeve length, chest width, all that. And when she wrote back, she commented that the older one doesn't like things that are really long. Like she'd rather have stuff right at her waist. So this is actually the shorter of the 2 sweaters. But I did get to see them over Christmas. It was not even for 24 hours. They went to see my parents for a couple of days over Christmas, and I drove down just by myself the day after Christmas. So we had one evening and the next morning together, and somewhere in the chaos of that like 18-hour period, I did manage to get them to try these on to make sure they fit, so I could check sleeve length and everything. And they do, but I need to send them. One small modification I did to the pattern for this one was that I put garter edging instead of ribbing. I don't always want to do that, but sometimes I just really like the look of it. And on cardigans especially, I like the look of a garter button band. I think it looks very neat. So that's the 8-year-old size. This is 8 to 10-year-old size in the pattern. This is the one for the younger one. This is the length that the pattern specifies, which is longer actually, which she's okay with. I got pockets in there. I didn't have time to get the pockets in the other one, but I think that's okay. So when the younger one tried this on, she said she liked it without sleeves, which doesn't surprise me because she's a very, very active child. She never stops moving and tends to run warm. So I said, okay, I can figure that out. So I did maybe an inch of sleeve before doing a garter edge, and I did one round, this wants to flip up a little, one round of fairly rapid decreases. So it's not exactly a puffed sleeve, but I just sort of brought in all the decreases at once before doing this because I didn't want like a full sleeve that was going to flap up. I didn't think that would look very nice. I got yellow buttons for both cardigans. They have little dots on them. These are from the sow's ear. I picked these out the other day. I was there to meet a friend for coffee. Let's see. What shall I say? One comment. Okay, a couple things. One thing about the pattern. It's top down, knit all in one go, which is great. They have neck shaping, obviously, which I very much appreciate. The way the pattern is written, all the neck shaping is done with short rows. So you have all the stitches cast on at the beginning, but you do short rows for a little while to make sure that the front neck comes down, which is fine. The other way to do that, like with a raglan sweater or any top-down sweater, is to not cast on all the stitches, like maybe cast on to about here. And as you're going back and forth, you will do increases like you would with the raglan, but you would also increase along the neckline and then cast on the last few when you get to the front and the neckline just goes straight across. I almost think that's a little better because you're less likely to have the fabric puckering. I think sometimes with short rows you can get a little bit of weird puckering, but it seemed fine for this. But people seem to default to short rows for sweater shaping of all kinds. That's just the trend now. So I followed the instructions and it was fine. The other thing I had to do yesterday, aside from sewing on the buttons, was redo the neckbands because the first try, and it's still doing it ever so slightly, but my first try, it was just flipping really badly, flipping to the back. I think that had to do with the way I was picking up stitches. It's a little bit hard to explain, but I was just picking up like one leg of the stitch closer to the outside of the fabric. So I think it was just sort of naturally, it was almost like there was a natural fold line there. And then I also picked up one picked up stitch for every stitch on the cardigan. I think it was just too wide. So I pulled it out when I saw how bad it was and that blocking didn't fix it, and I even like pressed it, that didn't fix it. I pulled it out and I picked up 3 for the collar, 3 stitches for every 4 that were on the garment. I did this for both sweaters. And I also picked up through both legs of the cast on stitch at the top. And I think both of those things helped rectify the problem. It still wants to flip out a little bit, not as bad. Anyway, I need to send these off, but I'm very pleased with how they turned out. The yarn, as I mentioned, is Swish DK. I seem to have dropped the ball of merino that I brought to show you, but here's an extra one of the pink. This is called Crush. This is the brightest pink that I could find on their website. She really likes bright pink, so that's what I went with. It's a superwash, 100% fine superwash merino wool. It is very, very soft. I don't think there's going to be any issues with scratchiness or itchiness with this yarn. It did stretch when I wet blocked it. I put it in the dryer a couple of times to help kind of pull it back into shape, although I think the sweaters may have grown a little bit, which is fine for growing children, but if you're making an adult-sized garment or something that you do not want to grow, keep that in mind. And my last comment is just that because it is so soft, I am not terribly confident that it's going to hold up to wear for very long without pilling. I've read other comments online that this stuff pills like nobody's business. I hope it doesn't look messy and worn like immediately. I hope it lasts them the season or so before they grow out of it and need bigger sizes. But it's just something to be aware of. It's a trade-off. If you want a really soft sweater, especially in superwash yarn, like in washable yarn, it's hard to find something that is both very soft and won't pill. things just seem to go together. That's it for my finished objects. Let's take a breath and go into works in progress. So I have a couple of sock projects to show you. I'm not going to show you all my socks and projects. I do that a lot, don't I? I'm not going to show you all my socks in progress, but I will show you the ones that I've been working on. I started a couple of pairs of socks in December with the intention of them being holiday gifts. They're not done. It's okay. The intended recipients don't know about them. It will be a nice surprise when they do get them. Not worried about that. The first one I think I showed these to you before. I am making some very sparkly socks for somebody who I like to send this person. I've been making socks for this person for a long time, and I really like to find sort of loud, ostentatious colors and yarns because it's socks. Why not? So I've got the first one done, and you can see the sparkle. It's pretty intense. Pretty intense. So I think I had part way down the cuff when I last made a video. And I've made a lot of progress, obviously. The yarn is West Yorkshire Spinners Signature Sparkle. This is all British yarn. Some of it is Blue-Faced Leicester. Here's the label for you. The color is called Vintage Tinsel, which seems very holiday appropriate. And I think it's a good name for this. These are definitely vintage colors. So I'm well on my way on the second sock on the foot. You can see on this side, I've got these markers to help delineate how many rounds to do. It just helps make counting easier. And for these socks, it's very straightforward. I don't use a pattern. My method is for self-striping, I do a short row heel so as not to interrupt the stripe so much. But for these, I cast on 66 stitches with size 1 needles. Here you can see the one in progress. I have zings, which are metal. Very slick, I like them. I cast on 66 because the feet these are intended for are slightly bigger than mine. Also, it makes the math you do for the heel a little bit more straightforward because I do the short row heel over half of the stitches, and I do the short rows. I divide the heel stitches then are divided into thirds. So when I've got 33 stitches on the heel, it's easy. I can do 11, 11, 11, rather than having to adjust for a number that's not divisible by 3. Anyway, you probably don't need to know all that. I like the garter stitch texture for the heel, and I should be done with these soon. This is like meeting knitting, sitting and watching a movie knitting, sitting at my parents' house, playing board games knitting. A lot of good progress. So I should have quite a bit of this left by the time I'm done with that sock. It's a pretty hefty skein of yarn. I mean, it's 100 grams, but there's a lot. So that's the first work in progress. The second thing, I don't know that I had started these in my last episode. I don't think so. I decided to make a pair of tweed socks for my dad. They're not done for Christmas, obviously, but he'll appreciate them whenever they're done. And I gave him some very nice jam in his favorite flavor, so it's fine. But these are some just sort of plain tweed socks in a nice masculine dog food brown color. One time when my son was really little, he asked my dad what his favorite color was, and my dad wrote back blue, or probably the other favorite color would be dog food brown. I'm not sure why he said that. I think he wears a lot of plain colors, so maybe that's where that came from. So he's getting some dog food brown tweed socks. The yarn is Knitpicks Stroll Tweed. This main color is called Rabbit Heather. which is a nice kind of light brown. And the contrast, I think this is oyster heather. It's like a very, it's sort of a dark cream. And I like how it goes with these neutrals. I put stripes at the top just because it gives it a little bit of a hiking sock vibe, which I wanted. I cast on, I'm using size 1 needles. These are Licca brand, I just got these and I really like them. They're wood, so especially in the size 1, it's delicate, but they're smooth, sharp enough, lightweight. It's good needles. I cast on 72 stitches. Since this is not self-striping or patterned in any way, I'm just doing a heel, flap, and gusset with eye of partridge heel. Garter ridges down the side of the heel to make picking up the gusset easier. And I think I am close to being ready to do those toe decreases. I'm gonna have to measure and check against the shoe size for my dad to be sure. Now that I'm looking at it, I might do the toe in this cream color just to help balance out the stripes at the top, but I haven't totally decided yet. These, I haven't worked on these in a week or so just because I've been trying to finish those other sweaters and was in the mood to knit the sparkly sock, but these will get done before long, I think. Again, these are very good, sort of easy, mindless socks to knit on while I've got other things going on, occupying my mind. All right. I think in my last episode, I had talked about wanting to make colorful hats for my nieces to go with their sweaters. That didn't get done. That was too ambitious. I have the yarn, so I need to do something with it. But when I get there, I'll tell you about it. But in the meantime, sorry, I keep leaning over because I'm knocking things on the floor. In the meantime, I was doing some reorganizing and sort of going through my stash, as I tend to do at the end of the year, and found this yarn that I may have showed you before that I got, oh man, kind of the end of 2021, so a little over 3 years ago, intending to make sweaters for my nieces. This is the sparkly episode, by the way, because it's sparkly yarn again. This is the yarn. Can you see the sparkle? Kinda. Maybe it shows up better in the white. I got red, white, and this bright. I don't know how well this is showing up on the camera, but it really is quite obvious in person. So I got this when a local shop was closing down and they had everything discounted, and I have no willpower, so I went and I bought a lot of it. And I haven't seen this anywhere else. I don't know if this was discontinued or some kind of rare, you know, just like not very commonly found yarn. This shop tended to get a lot of that. They would have a lot of stuff on closeout, and I think it was just overstock or older yarns that weren't being sold. But it's Plymouth. It's called Electra Lite. Here's the label. And it's, for being so sparkly, it's surprisingly soft. It's 75% superwash merino wool, 20% nylon, and 5% lurex. So that lurex is the shiny strand through it. And it really is quite soft. And when I got it, I thought, oh, I'll make something for my nieces out of this. You know, I'll make like a, you know, sparkly holiday colorwork sweaters. Well, I didn't. And the thought of making more sweaters and fingering weight yarn at this time just wasn't quite, I just hadn't done it. And they're big enough now that I might not have enough with the yarn that I've got to do that. So, but I did want to use it because the colors are nice and I like the sparkle, and I just felt like casting something on. So I've cast on a hat, and it is color work. And I know that I don't love doing color work with superwash yarn, but it's okay. It's for kids. So superwash is good for that. So all I have is the a little bit of the brim so far in 1x1 rib. But the hat I am making is called Lumi Lite. Here's the photo from the pattern. It's by Jessica McDonald. I made this hat before for somebody else about a year ago in totally different yarn. I think that was sport weight, so I had to adjust the sizing. This I am making the teen size. I didn't swatch, I'm just hoping it works. But it's this beautiful snowflake pattern, and I thought, you know, snowflake color work in sparkly yarn, that just seems right. So I'm gonna do this for the older one who really loves aqua teal colors. And then for the younger one, I'm gonna do it in red and white, which I know isn't pink, but red's what I've got. So my goal is to get these both done and send them for Valentine's Day, because I just think that would be a fun little surprise and not as much work as a whole sweater. This pattern is beautiful. I love Jessica McDonald's designs. I have several of her patterns and I want to make more of them. Like with the Boneyard Sweethearts, I would not recommend this for beginner colorwork knitting, just because some of those floats are long and you have to figure out how to deal with them. In a hat, it's not as big of a deal because there's not as much to snag on those floats, but and I'm not going to show you the chart, but you can see there's like a lot of blank space, you know, in between the snowflakes. And I've marked on the chart some places where I will do ladder back jacquard. But it's something to keep in mind, because some of these it's like 6 or 7 stitches, you know, before you change the color. Some it's even longer than that because things are pretty spaced out. And it's just, I just wouldn't recommend it for beginner, unless you're a very confident beginner and aren't afraid of trying lots of new things at once. So that's what I have going on. Those are all things for other people. My last work in progress is something that I'm making for me. This is part of the Self-Indulgent Knit Along, which is an event run every year by the Yarniacs podcast. It's an audio podcast. I've talked about them many times before. They've been going since like 2012, I think, or 2013. So it's well established. They have a wonderful supportive group on Ravelry, and they have a couple of knit-alongs every year. And this is one of them. It's the Self-Indulgent Knit Along. It runs from the December solstice through the March equinox. And basically the rules are make something that feels self-indulgent. Start and finish within that timeline, and it needs to be self-indulgent. So yarn that you really love, a pattern that you really love. It doesn't even have to be something for you, as long as you really enjoy it and it feels indulgent to do. But, you know, if you've been waiting for the opportunity to make yourself like an all cashmere cardigan with lots of cables, like that's the time to do it. That's not what I'm doing. But I am making a cowl for myself. I love cowls. I love making them. You can see I sort of have a color theme going. But this is indulgent because it's for me, because it's fun to knit. And because I am using this really nice yarn that somebody gave me a year ago. So it's special. It's the brand is Silver Pennies Yarn Co., which I had not heard of before. It's a sock yarn that's a merino yak nylon blend. But because of the yak in it, I don't want to use it for socks. I would rather have something around my neck. Here's the label. The color is called Fuchsia Fury, and it's a beautiful, deep, deep, rich fuchsia, like almost magenta. I think it's showing up red on my screen because I'm wearing this sweater, which is more pink than this. So by contrast, this is showing up red, but this really is kind of a magenta fuchsia color. And I mean, it's knitting up a little. The yarn is a little ropey-ish because it's sock yarn, but I think it'll probably bloom when I wash it. The pattern is called Heartwarmer. I don't know if the textures are showing up in this, so I'll yank a picture from online and insert it so you can see better. The designer is Justyna Lorkowska. I think she's Polish. But it's cool because like you're never really doing the same thing twice. Like so far I had ribbing to start with, and then there was this cable lace pattern for a few inches, and then there was this sort of interrupted rib pattern. So there's like a little bit of garter, a little bit of rib, a little bit of garter, etc. And now I'm in a section where there are bobbles. Bobbles are fun. They're a little slow going, you know, because basically for a bobble, what you're doing is taking one stitch, doing a whole bunch of increases in that one stitch, knitting back and forth a couple times, and then decreasing so you get this, you know, protrusion. And after the bobble section, there's like a broken rib, and then there's a smocking section. I've never done smocking, so I don't even know how that works. And then there's another little simple lace pattern before the final ribbing. The pattern calls for a little bit more yardage than I have in this skein. So if I have to leave out one of the textures so that I don't run out of yarn, I will do that. But it's a fairly tall cowl, so I don't think that's gonna be a problem. I don't think it's gonna like look weird or fit weird or anything like that. So yeah, I'm thoroughly enjoying it. It's really nice to make something for myself. I love texture. You know I knit a lot of color work, but texture is what I really love to knit. So this feels very self-indulgent. And this will not be my last self-indulgent project. I have until like the latter part of March, and I've got a lot of other ideas. So when I get there, I will share them. Whew, I have been talking for a while. But I did want to share just a little bit about some books I've been reading. This won't be a booktube thing. Like, I'm not always going to share everything that I'm reading. But lately, it's been a lot of really good stuff. So I want to tell you about it. You may, if you watch my last couple episodes, you'll know that I've been on a Kazuo Ishiguro kick. He wrote Remains of the Day. That might be his most famous one. I read his first book, A Pale View of Hills, and then before Christmas I finished Never Let Me Go, which was incredible. I'm still kind of trying to figure out what I think about it. It's not really sci-fi, but there's definitely kind of a futuristic sci-fi element to the situation that the main characters are in. But it's really about their relationship to each other and how complicated that is, and what makes them special. So, loved it. Recommend. After that, I started seeing advertisements for a movie called Night Bitch, starring Amy Adams. And I was like, that is really familiar. Why is that so familiar? Well, it turns out that it is a movie that's come out. My husband told me yesterday it's now available on Hulu already, so I'll be watching it because I didn't want to, go to a theater for something like that. But turns out that I have the book. This was one of my library finds. They have a shelf of used books. All the paperbacks are like either $1 or $2. You can see this was a $2 book, so this is a splurge. But it's a novel that was written fairly recently. Copyright 2021, so just 4 years ago, by Rachel Yoder, who grew up Mennonite. So if you know, you know. Anyway, I mean, I loved it. I loved how this was written. It's about a young mother who had a really ambitious art career, but she had to put it on hold to stay home with her toddler son. And her husband has a job where he's traveling like all the time, like just about every week he is gone. So she has to do like 100% of the domestic and childcare at their home during the week. And strange things start happening, and she starts to wonder if she's turning into a dog because she just like wants to go out at night and run wild and chase rabbits, and it's really good. There's even a part with some other book mommy like mommy and me library moms that she knows, and one of them is running an MLM, and it's like, the thing that I like about this book so much is that she so vividly and accurately describes the deep ambivalence that many stay-at-home moms feel. And this, I mean, look, this is a particular class of person. Like, she is middle class, she has a partner, she's not earning money but doesn't need to because her husband is earning money. Like, let's just be upfront about kind of what that situation is. But the way she describes how she's feeling and how deeply ambivalent she is about all of it is just so spot on. I loved it. And I'm excited to watch the movie. So when that was done, I went rooting through my pile of $1 or $2 library books, and I found Plain Song, which I knew was like an award winner, famous, figured I should read it. It's by Kent. I don't know if you say this as Haruf or Haruf. I read this in just a couple of days. It was very good. It's beautiful. It's about several different people in this really small town in rural Colorado and how their lives intersect and kind of how they interact with each other. And you just kind of end up falling in love with all of the characters whose points of view that you're experiencing. There are some other people in the town who you just hate and don't like very much, but because of how they treat the main characters. But it's very endearing, and I loved it. So I actually recommended this to my son. My son's 18, and I think for an 18-year-old, he's fairly well read. But a couple of years ago, and I mentioned this on the channel at the time, he read The Road by Cormac McCarthy. So I read it too. And that book is really bleak. You have to kind of brace yourself psychologically to read it. But this book is much less sort of despondent than The Road, but there was something about the quality of the writing and the way the characters are described that kind of reminded me of that. So I thought my son might enjoy this. So that's what I've been reading. I know this is running long, but I'm going to keep going because I don't feel like going back to work just quite yet. And I have a few things to share about the new year. Not really specifically, just sort of my thoughts on like New Year's resolutions and how people tend to approach that. I don't ever do New Year's resolutions. In fact, I think sort of as a concept that's falling out of favor, because I think we all know that resolutions are really, you're just setting yourself up to fail if you're like making all these plans to do things that you've and develop habits that you've never had before. Like, that's really hard to do. So yeah, New Year's resolutions don't work for a lot of people. But I've seen a lot of, at least people that I follow in crafty spaces and stuff, a lot of people like to make goals or have a word of the year or intentions or something. And I don't even do that. I have to be honest, it's kind of a hard time of year. I live in the upper Midwest. We don't get a lot of daylight. I struggle with having enough energy. Right now in particular, I'm feeling kind of overwhelmed by a variety of things, and it's mostly stuff that's not overwhelming, which is kind of weird, but it's just all the little things are piling up, and it's kind of hard for me to sort out how am I going to get everything done? How am I going to make sure the right things are prioritized? We've got some changes coming down the pike at work, and it's all just, it just sort of brings up some anxiety for me. And the thought of trying to set intentions or put more obligations on myself is not going to be helpful. So I'm I'm not doing that. That said, I sort of constantly have the goal, I'm constantly renewing my own intention of like trying to buy less yarn and use up stash and be more organized and all of that stuff. And there's no reason to start that on January 1st versus any other time. But I did do some clearing out of and reorganizing of my craft space. There's a lot there. I gave away a whole bunch of fabric. That felt pretty good. But yeah, there is something unappealing about like creating more accountability for myself where it doesn't really matter. Like I've got enough of that already externally, right? Yeah. I don't know that I really had more to share than that. I love a good stash tour. So like anybody else out there who's like doing a stash tour, doing a reorganization, sort of doing a assessment of what they've done, what they've used, and how they're organizing things, I love it. I'm just personally not going to be doing that to share. I did want to share one final thing. I have an online pal who shared a poem with me. And like, please don't turn this off because I am going to read you a poem, but it's not mine. I'm not going to read you my own poetry. I think that, yeah, I'm not going to do that. But these are just really good words to live by. So maybe in lieu of New Year's resolutions or whatever, it might be good to think about this. And I will find a link to this and put it in the show notes. The one I found to print was like apparently a large print version, so it's on several pages, but it's not that long. It's called To Be of Use by Marge Piercy. The people I love the best jump into work headfirst without dallying in the shadows and swim off with sure strokes almost out of sight. They seem to become natives of that element, the black, sleek heads of seals bouncing like half-submerged balls. I love people who harness themselves, an ox to a heavy cart, who pull like water buffalo with massive patience, who strain in the mud and the muck to move things forward, who do what has to be done again and again. I want to be with people who submerge in the task, who go into the fields to harvest and work in a row and pass the bags along, who are not parlor generals and field deserters, but move in a common rhythm when the food must come in or the fire be put out. The work of the world is common as mud. Botched, it smears the hands, crumbles to dust. But the thing worth doing well done has a shape that satisfies, clean and evident. Greek amphoras for wine or oil, Hopi vases that held corn, are put in museums, but you know they were made to be used. The pitcher cries for water to carry, and a person for work that is real. Doesn't that seem like good words to live by? Okay, that's all for today. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.